Hi there, everyone. With me today, I have Michael Shearer, Chief Solution Officer of Hawk, and coming to the podcast from London. Welcome.
Hi, Ivo. It's a pleasure to be with you, and we've got an exciting conversation ahead.
Great. Tell our listeners who don't know you a little bit about yourself and your background.
Hi. Yeah, so Michael Shearer, as Ivo said, I'm the Chief Solution Officer at Hawk, which is a financial crime technology firm based in Germany. Before joining Hawk, which I did at the start of this year, I spent the last 10 years at HSBC, where I was a managing director in charge of compliance product management, which meant essentially the financial crime suite of capabilities, detection and investigation across the world. And before that, I was in UK government for the first 20 years of my career in investigations and other types of work. So, yeah, a long history in this type of business, and a techie at heart. I'm a geek at heart, so I still do a bit of coding. Still do a little bit of hands-on stuff when I can.
Thanks for the intro. I think an interesting aspect that you forgot to mention is that you're also an O'Reilly book author. It's a good segue into saying you actually are hands-on, and I'm surprised that the book is so practical. Can you say a few words about your author experience?
Sure. Yeah. So something I did last year. Long time ambition was to write a book. And I'm a big advocate of a topic called entity resolution, which is a technique to enable you to join data sets together. And there wasn't really a good guide on the market for how actually practically to do that and to make that happen. There were some good academic texts, but there wasn't really a good hands-on guide. And so I thought, well, heck, why not? Why don't I write one? So I should give a little plug. Here it is. There's my book, Hands-on Entity Resolution by O'Reilly. You can get it on Amazon, I think it's plugged a gap in the marketplace for people coming new to the art and science of joining data together, and I hope it's useful for folk.
It's actually very interesting because it is a topic where we see a lot of products and implementations, but the methodology, the algorithms have not really had a proper definition that everyone agrees on. Can you say a few words about what are the challenges with entity resolution, and especially in the context of integrating and providing high quality data in large enterprises?
Yeah. So let me introduce a little bit about, for those who aren't familiar with what entity resolution is and why you need it, particularly in an enterprise context. So entity resolution is the process of identifying that you've got two records or information about two entities, whether those are individuals, people, organizations, what have you, that are actually the same thing. Now, they may have originated from different sources, but they're actually describing the same real world thing, the same real world entity. And this can happen a lot in big organizations, particularly where they have grown via acquisition, and so have maybe a customer database from one organization and a customer database from another, and then you try to bring them together and you find there's two Michael Shearers, for example. Well, are they the same Michael Shearer? And then you have to start looking at the attributes of that person and saying, well, actually, it looks like they are, because of course they won't have the same keys, they won't have the same identifiers in the databases, and so you won't know that they're the same person. And that's the kind of base level of entity resolution. That's what people call data matching, or record linkage is another term that people use. But then you can go up the scale of bringing together a number of different sources of information together, where they all relate to the same person. Maybe you've got an information from a company registration database or a customer database, or maybe a news article, and you want to join all of those together so that you've got a rich picture of that person and their place in the world. And that can get quite challenging, especially with very common names, or working across different alphabets or character sets, for example. Or if, for example, you've got poor quality data sources, which we're going to talk about a bit later on, where maybe you haven't got a standardization of how the first name is recorded or the last name is recorded, or maybe there's different family name structures that happen. There are lots of reasons why what sounds like a really simple problem of saying, is it the same person, actually has been a challenge in the industry for years and years, and one that we're still, improving and working at every day.
Excellent. And that's basically what people now come to realize, is that in order to unleash the potential of higher added value AI, automation, ML projects, they really need to understand where entity resolution is a problem at their data sets and how is that affecting business decisions that are taken in an automated way, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, an AI algorithm, as good as they are, and they're pretty amazing these days if they're used in the right context, they're only as good as the data you give them. And AI works, in my experience, works particularly well when you give it rich data. The more attributes you can give it about a person or an entity, the more it can discern whether, say, the type of behavior that person's exhibiting is normal or abnormal. So you want to give it rich data. And if that data comes from lots of different data sources, you need to bind it together first before you put it into the AI system. And that way you can make AI really sing. So I see entity resolution and other data preparation techniques as being the foundation, the building blocks for really good quality AI. If you don't sort your data out first, your AI will not perform the way that you'd like it to.
Right. Was this what was your motivation? Is this really the idea to say, well, being able to utilize AI models and in the compliance technology space that you work on for so long, one of the reasons that you decided to move on to your role as Chief Solution Officer at Hawk?
Yeah, very much so. So I think that the compliance industry, particularly the financial crime industry, has been doing things a certain way for quite some time, and that provides a good foundational baseline of control for managing some of the risks that financial institutions have. But it is renowned for generating a huge quantity of false positives. So it flags risk when there really isn't any there. And the reason for that is because the methods that have been used for so long are quite coarse, they're quite blunt. They apply the same criteria to pretty much everybody, to all the customers, etc. And as a result, if you cast a very wide net, you get a lot of things that you didn't want. Where the power of AI is to be much more surgical and focused in saying, yes, that's unusual, but it's unusual in the context of that particular individual or that particular firm, etc. So you can be much more discerning about who you flag, and that's important for financial institutions because it means they can focus their resources on the real risk. But it's also important from an individual perspective as well for the customer, because that means there's less friction introduced into their daily life when they're trying to do their normal business, and they don't get caught up having their transactions blocked or whatever when they're it's perfectly innocuous and they've just got caught in this huge dragnet of compliance.
Right, because it's just some rule fire that is pretty coarse, pretty basic, and it's pretty clear. You call the customer, they're like, "Oh, I'm a false positive. Don't worry about it." Yeah, we know. We just have to do it. It's a due diligence exercise, and yeah.
Yeah,
but it's also optimizing a lot of the cost, right? Because most of the problems that relate to this is that banks have to and insurance companies, financial institutions, like they have to walk a fine line between it's an optimization exercise, right? Whereas the need, we want to have the option to find the needle in a haystack, while not completely having first, second, third, fourth level support people just flagging false positives as such. What do you think is the or what's the approach that you believe in would solve this in a sustainably better way going forward?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. So the the heart of financial crime detection is a trade-off. And it's a trade-off between what I would call risk coverage. So how much of the potential suspicious behavior do you find? And alert efficiency. So how much noise or other distractions do you generate in that process? And there's really no getting away from the trade-off between the two. If you take a very conservative approach and you set your risk thresholds very low, then what happens is you catch a lot of the bad behavior, but you do it at the price of generating a huge amount of noise. Whereas if you set your risk thresholds really high, then the only behavior you catch is really egregious. So your efficiency is really good, but that means you tend to miss some stuff because you've set your thresholds so high. And so you're always looking for that trade-off and balance. And it's all about understanding your customer population, understanding what products and services they use, their inherent risk, if you will, and then positioning yourself on the curve to say, okay, well, for this population, I actually need to be pretty conservative. Whereas for this population, yeah, not so much. And AI can do that automatically. So AI can segment a population, into very fine-grained groupings in a way that a human being just can't do. You would have to write thousands of rules for every individual sort of niche little bit of the population, and you just can't do that. You certainly can't maintain it. So I think AI really does have that power to do that. But like I said earlier, it's all about getting the right data and training the machine with the right stuff. Because if you train it to look for the wrong thing, it will happily just reproduce that time and time and time again.
Right. And there's like multiple problems associated with it, right? Even if you do want to introduce this, innovative approach, even if you do have the data scientists or like people knowing that, look, we can't just expand our rule sets to be kind of, as you mentioned, like the complexity gets out of hand. It's just not maintainable. Not only do you need something like what you described with what Hawk does, but then I'm thinking it's also the challenge of how you bring this into actual production, how you integrate it in the process. Because what we've seen, and it really is the nature of this compliance technology industry is that we have these established companies that have been doing it for so long. Innovation has been driven largely by leaps in regulation rather than someone saying, "Hey, we can optimize this 10x just because." And so, what do you think are the challenges to bring technology like this into the landscape?
I think 90% of this problem is actually about data. It's actually about getting a good training data set to allow you to leverage the AI really well. That's the key prerequisite, and that needs some thinking about. It needs careful selection of the material that you train on, so that you're teaching the machine the right thing. And it also needs the ability to join your data sets together so that you get the right information. And there's a bit of a mindset change with this as well. So people are used to a world where you told the machine what to do and it faithfully repeated what you told it to do in a very understandable way. And I think with AI, a lot with the supervised AI techniques particularly, you're working in the opposite direction. You're saying, I trust the decisions of this group of individuals who are my best people, and I want the machine to copy what my best people do. But that puts the power and the responsibility to train the machine on the hands of those experts. So you still need to have that really strong group of signals. And I think for smaller institutions or institutions that are just starting on this, they maybe don't have that body of knowledge to train machines on and to leverage AI. And I think that's an area where I think there's some responsibility in the industry still working this out for the big guys to help the small guys. So the people who've got the data, who've got the ability to train the machines, etc., need to be able to share what they know in a structured way with the little guys. Otherwise, the smaller folk really struggle to adopt some of this new stuff and really make it work.
Right. No, what you're mentioning is basically, the things like, explainability, understanding of how the system is pre-built for you. What I actually wanted to also address is how about this from a pure technology side, like bringing this into an existing complex landscape. regardless of the AI and the actual, business rules and AI logic, is a technology problem in and of itself, because then you're faced with the fact that anti-fraud and anti-money laundering experts, they really don't have the technology teams, the capability, and like you mentioned, the smaller organizations are even less capable um, of changing, rewiring their process to get the data that you mentioned in the correct to get the correct data sets actually to a system like Hawk and be able to profit from it. What do you see in terms of differences between the large corporates and kind of mid-sized organizations? What are the typical problems with it?
Yeah, so I think a big enabler in this space now is the whole sort of cloud infrastructure and the acceptance of cloud-based implementations. So it used to be, from a technology point of view, you had to go and build your own the whole stack yourself, and you had to secure that whole stack. And when you're dealing with very large quantities of very sensitive data, personal data, then that was a heavy lift before you even got going, before you even took even a first step. And I think now that there's a greater acceptance, even in the big financial institutions, of the ability to use the cloud platforms, and that actually they're secured to very high standards, means that you can benefit a lot from things that other people have already built and done, and you don't have to have the same sort of full range of technology experts at your fingertips. You can get a long way quite quickly now by leveraging what's already available, and I think that's been a big game changer. And I think it also helps with speed of introduction, because it takes you can set the cloud infrastructure up very fast, and you can get going pretty quickly, and that's always what I would encourage is the excellent is the enemy of the good in this space. So, start small, start simple, and iterate, because you learn so much about what your business problem really is, and how AI, for example, can really help.
Right, but you also can, like you mentioned, you can have a improvement in speed in terms of what used to be batch process. You can now, with the cloud stack, you can go to real time. You can have these decisions done in real time, and what used to be almost impossible with the legacy tech, now it can actually wire together and get going. And the interesting thing is that precisely these compliance and highly sensitive data sets, while using the security, and if you go best practices with the cloud, you're actually much better off than having your batch thing running in the basement of your data center, which is what it used to be, let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? So this is a whole a topic, and we talked about this earlier. Managing these pipelines. Sometimes I get the feeling that especially pure compliance decision makers, they aren't really aware of what the entire data flow, including batch and real time, is, in order to get the IT to get their stuff going. How do you view this? This whole set of problems?
Yeah, I think that's been the story of the last 10 years of my career. Honestly, has been, I think, in part educating people to understand that how to achieve what sounds very simple, but is actually, when you're dealing with very large data sets and you're dealing with a lot of different business lines and different sources of data, the simple becomes complicated very, very fast. And it's not unusual, thinking back to my previous banking experience, to have hundreds of different feeds of data all coming in at different times, some of them real time, some of them in batch, but you want to bring them all together to tell a story, and a story at multiple levels. So you want to tell a story at the level of a transaction, you want to tell a story at the level of a customer, and you want to tell a story sometimes at the level of a group of customers who maybe are acting together in a suspicious manner as part of a crime group or what have you. So not only do you have to harmonize and structure and connect all of the different signals that you have, but you then have to present that information in different ways to different types of people for different use cases. And that's a lot of wiring. I sometimes used to think I spent my time being a plumber. I was plumbing these different pipes of water, and this water had to go over here, and then this water had to go over there. And there was a lot of connecting the pipes together, and sometimes the pipes burst, and you find that what you thought was a complete data set, didn't work or was missing on a particular day, and then there's a whole process to try and unpick what that meant and what was affected by that change. So in complex enterprise environments, it's tough. I will not kid you, it's tough.
Right. As many of our viewers will relate to us sometimes as data leaders, having had multiple times in the past to bring examples of plumbing and construction and building buildings, data warehouses. How is data warehouse similar to a normal warehouse? And the data pipelines and the complexity of a clogged system are easy to explain. And sometimes, like you mentioned, it really is about educating and creating awareness about why certain things are even if they sound similar, are like a giant leap forward in terms of technology capability to get them done with like real time, stopping a payment for suspicion of machine learning based decision that it might be a suspicion transaction for money laundering or for fraud. That is infinitely more difficult than ex post saying, oh, check these number of transactions, they might be wrong because of various technology challenges, let alone the fact that you can't really oftentimes stop it or revert the transaction. So so that's also it's also something that we work on with our integration projects. And it's interesting to see the confluence of that type of cloud technology with frontier technology of actually solving the business issue at hand, which is what you guys do at Hawk. Right. What's your, like, if you're talking with some of the, to some of our listeners, what's your ideal scenario of going from 0 to 1, having some sort of a legacy ex post batch based course rules based engine to having something like a modern AML and anti-fraud solution in like Hawk does? Like, what are the most important things that one should consider when implementing something like this?
So I think first of all, it's really important that at the top level you understand the population that you're dealing with. You understand the types of actors or individuals or whatever scope it is that you have, and you understand the inherent risks that are part of that population, because that sets the scene for everything else. And then I think it's about identifying those pieces of data, bits of information that have the most predictive power, which are the ones that actually give you the best chance of discerning between good and bad behavior, and then starting with those. And if you don't have a large body of casework already, then starting with some simple rules-based flags is often a good thing, but making sure that you've got very good labeling of what your investigators actually see when they're looking at that casework. So very important to capture whether the machine saw what you wanted it to see, did it detect the right behavior, but also what was actually present overall for the customer. So being able to label that information is like really, really crucial. And then you build up from there. You kind of bootstrap your way up the curve, and you can get more and more sophisticated with either more rules or starting to introduce AI, or maybe you can bind two data sources together to give you an even richer kind of data set. But I think iterative improvement really is the key to this business. and putting faith in and having some really good investigative outcomes that you can work from.
And what do you think about the fact that's some like played it? I mean, the devil's advocate here. That what often very by nature and by definition, good so risk averse compliance department would say, well, we don't want to rock the boat, right? We have a solution that's already plugged in. What would you advise them to consider that a step towards innovation, like you suggested, with an iterative process, starting small, building out? What are some of the common problems that you see are easily addressed if they, such that they can actually start such a project, right? That they are unblocked by thinking, oh, this is like changing our core banking system, impossible. Where in reality, this thing is not impossible, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of it is about starting off with some good proof of concepts, really. So doing some tests and some trials against a sample of your data, and it really needs to be real data here. There's only so much you can do with synthetic data, and seeing what uplift you can get. So it's very achievable to look at overlaying, say, an AI-based solution to reduce the number of false positives that you have by simply considering more data factors than a rules-based system can do. And often that can be integrated relatively easily into your process. So the AI can give you a score or another factor that can be considered in the rule-based process. So you don't have to change your workflow too much. You don't have to change your training too much, but you can get the benefits of more operational efficiency relatively quickly with that. And then once you're comfortable with that approach, then maybe you can look to add in things like anomaly detection, where you could enrich the alerting process a bit more. So I would say, take what you have, see what data of that you can feed to another sort of process, put it alongside, compare the two, and then take some steps to introduce something like that.
Right, and I don't want to lean out the window too much, but this is also something, from what I gather, regulators across the board in the EU and the UK, elsewhere, would support, since innovation in that space isn't really natural, right? So starting and testing and working closer with them and saying, okay, we're going this new way to be more, like you mentioned, surgical in our in the things that we find and more precise. That is certainly, I think, an added advantage. I think, rather than anything else.
I think the regulatory community is encouraging the use of these technologies now. So to give you an example, just recently the FCA, so the Financial Crime Regulator in the UK, issued a consultation paper where they were proposing some changes to their financial crime guide, which is the guide that they give to firms to say what best practice is in mitigating financial crime risk. And one of the things they said in that guide was, or in that potential update to the guide was, they actively encourage firms to look at techniques such as use of AI and network analytics. And they also recognized in that upcoming guidance that those systems work in a slightly different way. And so you may not be getting 100% perfect correlation between the old way and the new way. But that what really matters is whether the new way overall is more effective. Is it actually finding more crime? Is it actually finding that suspicion faster, giving criminals less opportunity to do their business? And that we need to stop looking at trying to hit perfection, because human beings aren't perfect either. We all make mistakes, and especially imagine you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, day after day. Human nature, but you become a little bit, not to say complacent, but just insensitive over time. in a way that a machine just doesn't.
Right.
And so I think there's now some growing recognition that there's a place for these technologies. That's not to say that you still don't need a pair of human eyes on things at the end. I think certainly when it comes to taking actions that are actually going to affect individuals on a tangible basis, then having a human review is a very good thing. But there's a lot of work that the machines can do before you get to that point.
Right, but it's. I mean, to add to this, I think it's the algorithm and being able to isolate the suspicious cases better is one thing, but the other thing is the overall technology leaping. Having a better workflow. Just being cloud-based, being able to integrate with multiple systems the way standard client server application or desktop application, what have you that used to. So there's this normal technology leaps that comes with it, and then the ability to kind of start small with defined rules and then grow into this neater, more advanced techniques is really what you should go for, and see it holistically. And so an interesting thing I just wanted to reflect on what you mentioned right at the beginning of the conversation was that, we think of this compliance stuff as just, we want to be compliant. We want to be 100% on the right side of everything. But then, often the customer is forgotten and saying, you're actually going to have a better experience by not bothering. If you have like 99.9 or really over 90% in most cases, a false positive rate, that means that 90% of these people get bothered and don't make a good that doesn't make for good customer experience. That, let's face it, in the past years as banking as an industry hasn't been great at that. So yeah, banks, airlines, you guys know what I'm talking about. Customer service hasn't really improved much, and so yeah, I think that's a much needed innovation that also impacts the actual customer, right?
Yeah, I think that in the fraud world, this has been known and acknowledged for years, I think. So I think fraud has always been seen as a trade-off between customer friction and losses. And so inside the big organizations, they know that if they crank their fraud controls up, and they require very stringent levels of authentication at every point, and they stop you using your card in locations that you don't normally use it, for example, you will drive down fraud rates. That's great, but you will do it at the price of introducing a lot of friction for customers whose cards don't work or payments get stopped for no good reason, etc., etc. So it's always been a trade-off, and I think in the compliance world, people haven't put the same level of priority on what the customer experience is, and I think these days, particularly, is now nearly a lot of payments are now instantaneous. Certainly, the younger generation expects everything to happen instantly, and the idea of having to wait 2 days before a payment comes through is kind of like, well, what my social media provider doesn't work that way. I see updates around the world instantly. Why can't I move money instantly? And I think that we've now got a tension between this desire to keep the criminals out, but our desire to also move at the pace that modern community and societies need. Right.
Modern technology in general is thankfully quite helpful for bringing this also to these unlikely areas of innovation such as compliance technology. So you can't really move away from that. I think what did you just to conclude before we conclude this talk? What are some of the, I guess, recommended topics to read on or to research that you'd advise people in the compliance technology space and compliance space in general before they embark on, let's say, their next AI enabled AML or anti-fraud project?
Yeah.
What is good preparation for something like this?
Yeah. so I think a great preparation is to actually get some basic understanding of how some of the AI stuff works, because I think that there's so much jargon and so much everything's referred to as AI, whereas I think there's a very defined subset of AI, machine learning, that's actually most appropriate. And I think having some doing some googling on that and actually learning how AI works, I think is really important, because I think once you understand how it works in more detail, it suddenly becomes a lot less scary, or it certainly did for me. It becomes a lot more understandable and a lot more explainable, and it's less like magic. And I always say to people, AI is just a clever way of generating a set of rules. So, if that makes you feel more comfortable, that's actually what's going on under the bonnet. The computers still only understand how to apply rules. It's
Your gradient boosted tree will not go sentient, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think look also at kind of the some of the new ways of looking at behavior and analysis. So network analytics, for example, I think is a hugely under resourced area in the financial crime world. So criminals don't act alone; they act in networks. And the old saying, I think, came from previous military conflicts: you need a network to fight a network. And I think that's so true. So you need to be able to take the insights from lots of different pieces of data and join those up to really fight this fight against financial crime. The criminals know this. They know where the weak points are. They know how to hide in the gaps. And we've got to get some of those gaps, connected up to have a fighting chance. So yeah, I think those are the areas I would encourage people to look at.
Right. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I would also add, just try to understand the data flows in a much more granular way, in a way that you as a business leader in the really as a subject matter expert haven't really gotten down to the details of it. Could be quite useful to shorten those replicated data or complex pipelines, and to understand also how you can maintain, if you, let's say, integrate a solution like Hawk, how to keep it running in a way where you have full control and ability to see almost in real time what's happening with the quality of the data, with the at the end of the day, try to understand the typical scenarios where things go wrong, because once you have that in detail, you'll be in a much better position to integrate a new solution and tie it to your landscape in the IT space, also working together with your IT leaders, if that makes sense.
100%. Yeah. And for the techies in the audience, one of the things I always do when I'm confronted with a new problem is I often try and just build a toy version of it, just to see, because I think usually if you start building a little toy version of the same thing, you suddenly realize just quite how, where the challenges really are. And I find that always opens my eyes to the real nature of the problem if I try and do a little toy version myself.
Excellent. Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about these things. Looking forward to talking to you soon, to working with you in the future. And how can people find you who want to find out more about you?
Yeah, well, thanks first of all for the opportunity, Ivo. It's been a great conversation, and you've touched on many topics that I'm quite passionate about. So thank you for giving me the time to do this. If people want to find out more, so I'm on LinkedIn, so you can look me up there, or you can of course have a look at the Hawk website if you want to find out a little bit more about what Hawk does. And again, I suppose the O'Reilly folk would be very upset with me if I didn't do another little plug for the book. So have a look at the book. It's on Amazon or on O'Reilly's portal. So if you want to dig into entity resolution and that, then I'd love to hear what you think and give me some feedback.
Great. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Thanks very much. Yes, all. Bye-bye.